We're going to kick it off with the Lowdown, where we talk all things Apple. First up on deck, I figured this would be very pleasing to you, Brother Tech, as this is something that you have been waiting for. While it hasn't rolled out to all of the 8 states it was originally um, uh, intended to roll out to, Apple Wallet's digital driver's license and ID have now gone live in the state of Arizona. This was confirmed by Apple on Wednesday for Arizona, with Colorado, Hawaii, Mississippi, Ohio, and Puerto Rico also pledging to come along on board. So I don't know if that means that Georgia is no longer in play. I don't know, but these were the states that were mentioned. So with this Apple Wallet driver's license, digital driver's license, and state ID, this can start to be added now, is actually live for the state of Arizona. And to begin the process of adding your digital driver's license or state ID, you just go and tap the plus button once you're inside of the wallet app. You select driver's license or state ID, and then you follow the on-screen setup instructions. Now, there are a couple of things that kind of go along with this because this is a state-issued form of identification that is used for identifying purposes. So in addition to following the on-screen prompts, you will be asked to scan both the front and back of your actual physical driver's license, and you will also have to take a selfie. I'm assuming there's some sort of technology in there that compares the picture to the actual person. Additionally, there's another step that's in there from Apple that is intended to be used for fraud prevention. And this is where the user, once they go through this process of setting up, they are prompted to do a series of facial and head movements. I'm assuming similar to when you do your Face ID to unlock your phone for when you're the new one, when they do the mask, they kind of focus on the eyes. But this is also a part of the setup. And the other piece to this is Apple is not responsible for verifying your request, which is what when you go in to add your driver's license to the wallet, the state is responsible for validating. Yes, this is a valid ID. Yes, this is a valid person, and that's one of the things when all this was coming to fruition. Apple was lobbying different states to be participants in this pilot because it is a two-way street. Apple can, of course, collect the data, but they needed to work with the states to ensure that there is a verification process to make sure that the ID is valid, because each state has a different type of ID, different types of barcodes, scans, validations, databases. So they're saying that, yes, we can add these to your phone, but the state itself is going to have to validate and verify that this is you and that this is a valid ID. The other thing that I thought was interesting along with this TSA, there are specific TSA checkpoints in certain airports. I wasn't able to find the list of airports that were taking this, but it is being accepted at TSA at security checkpoints. So, when you normally go to check in, have to show your ID and scan and all that good stuff, you'll be able to now tap your iPhone or your Apple Watch at the reader rather than having to show a physical copy. Again, the driver's license and state IDs are supported in the Apple Wallet on iPhone 8 or later, running iOS 15.4, and on Apple Watch Series 4 or later, running watchOS 8.4 or later. So we got our first state that is on board for this. Do you anticipate more ramping up pretty quickly, or?
It'll be a slow grind simply because the only place this works for us being end user is the TSA, right? So you have to be on an airplane or you have to be traveling. That's not back to normal because of COVID. So it's going to be a slow grind. Now, once this becomes acceptable at more places or more facilities or more institutions, in addition to the TSA, it'll be a slow grind because what's the point? Not what's the point, but there's a lot of, like you mentioned, all these bullet points. There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through to get this set up. The user has to do all these 3 and 4 steps. The state has to then approve the request because Apple is like, yo, we just
Hands
put the
off.
wallet, we just put the ID in the thing. We are not going to be responsible to where if something happens, we are in the middle. We are not in the
Right.
middle. We are just the mechanism for which users and the state can work together via these IDs, right? So
Right.
each state, like you mentioned, is different. The DMV, whatever, all their process is different. So each state individually has to work with Apple to be able to come up with a system on their end to approve this request for the ID to actually be legit in the Apple Wallet. The third thing, like I mentioned, it's only available at TSA. Like Charles mentioned, who's our one of our snobbists who's watching, he said you'll need to hand your phone to the police. The answer is no, because the police don't accept this right now. Now, when more places like law enforcement, like major concerts, major events, whether it be sports, whether it be concerts, whether it be shows, things of that nature, when it becomes they can support that, then more states will jump on board. But right now, only the TSA is doing it. So it's going to be a slow grind. To answer your question,
They'll
let's
likely
just
have
say
to have
law
some sort of
enforcement.
reader.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Now, once more places become acceptable, it'll almost be like the police. If I get pulled over, and the police need to verify my information, they'll have their phone or they'll have their reader, similar to how Apple just
Apple Pay,
um,
because everybody didn't accept Apple Pay until they started getting the readers at the different retail locations.
right, right. And then like just what last week, Apple started the tap to pay with an iPhone. So I don't need to have an iPad with a separate reader. I can use my phone as a merchant. Like if I'm selling my phone, selling something, instead of me having this
Doodads.
separate reader, separate POS, I can set up the tap to phone on my phone, and then you buying something from me, we can touch our phones, and then that's how we do the transaction. I would assume that'll be the same thing for the police. If I get pulled over, police need to get my information, I won't hand them my phone. I'll just tap my phone to theirs, and the only information that gets transferred is
Is
my
the ID.
ID. But until that happens, to answer your question, this is going to be a super slow grind.
Yeah. Yeah. At least it's moving. We are heading towards
We're getting
the
there slowly but surely.
Yep.
I wait for the day to where all I got to do is take my phone, and I'll have to take my wallet, so I don't have to lose my wallet and have to go cancel all these credit cards. If I
Mhm.
lose my phone, I can very
Just set
quickly
it
turn off
down.
access to that versus
Yep.
trying to dig through and figure out what credit cards I need to
What I
cancel.
had in my wallet, what I
Yeah,
didn't have in
right.
my
Yeah,
wallet.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this is once it gets mainstream, I believe it'll be a benefit. But
Yeah.
again, you got to get everybody on board, and
Yeah.
that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. Yeah. Whole another story. Because if you don't have an iPhone, this isn't going to help you. So, next up, Apple Card may be going international. As you know, both Terrance and I have Apple Cards, and it is a US based credit card only. But Apple has recently purchased a UK startup, which is a credit scoring startup. It is said that Apple has acquired Credit Kudos for approximately 150 million ducats. And Credit Kudos is a service for banks that aims to help them better and more quickly access the credit worthiness of anyone applying for a credit card. So, Apple nor Credit Kudos has come out and confirmed that this sale has happened. I was reading on one of the stores. I'm not sure if it's the one from Apple Insider or not, or somewhere else, but I saw. But if you go to the Credit Kudos website and go down to the privacy link, it takes you over to Apple. So people are saying that this is essentially the first step into getting the Apple Card internationally. both Tim Cook and the CEO of Goldman Sachs have both said previously that we're starting in the US with the Apple Card with the intent to allow this to go international. So this is being universally seen as the first step into ensuring that other people outside of the US will have the Apple Card.
So my question is, if this is Apple's attempt to bring the Apple Card international, what purpose? I still don't understand the purpose of credit kudos. Number one, how, even if they did, Apple didn't buy them, how are they making it easier for banks to deem or uh, figure out the credit worthiness of users? How is it different than how they normally do it? You know,
I'm assuming this is like their equivalent to Experian or Trans.
overseas.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
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 they don't
they're
have Experian, TransUnion,
I
Equifax.
don't know. It doesn't sound like it because they're saying that this particular company, this is what they do. They do credit scoring for banks.
Mhm.
So I didn't do enough research into it, but it sounds like this is what this company does. It decides what your credit score is and who gets credit. And currently, banks in the UK are using this firm to decide who gets credit and who
So if
doesn't.
Apple owns this company, doesn't that, not monopoly is not the right word, but couldn't it be seen as, let's just say I'm overseas and I apply for a American Express card and I'm going through this credit kudos company and they approve me, or they decline me, or
Mhm.
they approve me and they approve me with an APR of 17%. And then I'd be like, let me shop around. And then I apply for an Apple card. And since Credit Kudos, the mechanism for deeming credit worthiness is owned by Apple, I could see somebody making a claim that if I then apply for an Apple card, I get approved. And not only do I get approved, I get an APR of 12% as opposed to, 15 or 17 or 19% via American Express. I could see that being some problems, which kind of is the opposite of what Apple typically does. They kind of stay out of things, which is why they use Goldman Sachs to issue the Apple credit card in the first place, because Apple was
Mm,
like, nah, we ain't into the credit card.
yeah,
We're not financial institution. If that's between you and Goldman Sachs. We are just the hardware and the software to actually make the transactions. It seems kind of not. It seems kind of different, a different approach to what Apple does.
typically does.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because this
But
puts
I'm
them
wondering
in
if
the
it's
middle,
because
right?
it's banking is different in other countries than it is in the US. I think the US is probably uh, a very rare and specific way of handling banking. So I'm assuming that international banking is a lot different than how we handle it here, and maybe their option is to go this route. And yeah, looking at the website, it looks like it has all of these factors that go into what makes you worthy for credit, and it's disseminated to the different banking institutions. So I guess we sometimes, I have to say, we take for granted, here in the US, how things work here. We're kind of tunnel vision thinking that, oh, everybody works this way. No, we are a very specific breed. So the way we do banking and finance here, they have a whole international finance law rules, all those types of things. So it would stand to reason that the way they handle these type of financial transactions in other countries are different per country, different than the US. So yeah, it's maybe they are trying to get into the game of doing this after the success of the Apple Card in the US. So I don't know. I guess we'll see how this plays out. Like I said, neither one have commented that this story is true, but I did go to the Credit Kudos website and I did click on their privacy policy, and it sure enough takes you to the Apple privacy rules. And if you click on any of the legal takes you over to Apple. So yeah, so it looks like there is some sort of linkage. I guess we'll have to wait and see what actually comes of this, and how this actually is going to work internationally. Is it just going to be specifically for the UK? And if they want to branch out somewhere else into other parts of Europe, if there's something else they'll have to do. So this just happened this week, from my understanding. So it seems to be all very fresh and very new. So we'll just kind of have to see how it plays out. Next up on the Lowdown docket, Apple was hit for a second consecutive day of iCloud services being out. The outages hit first on Monday, and then another round on Tuesday, impacting Apple Music, books, podcasts on both iOS and macOS app stores were affected. There were partial outages and slowdowns on the second day for iCloud web apps, weather app, Apple Card, and the Game Center. And it appears as if everything was back up and restored by 7 p.m. Eastern on yesterday. Did you notice any outages with anything that you were using?
I did not. So this was news to me. Again, you know, sites are hungry for news, and the smallest indication that something is wrong becomes front page news because of our 24-hour, all day long, every second news cycle.
And everybody wants to be
Not,
first.
yeah, not to say it wasn't an issue. I didn't notice at all an issue. It could have just been luck of the draw. I wasn't really messing with, my stuff like that around these times, but this is one of those things to where if Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Instagram, has some sort of major outage, whether it be a blip, or whether it be for days, that becomes front page news,
Right.
and rightfully so, because, there are these are big companies and they have a lot of users. They have a lot of users' data.
Yeah.
So I'm putting my trust into you as a service product or service provider to make sure I have access to my products and services that I pay for, because those never go down. You never hear an outage of Apple's payment processing to stop people from paying for their services. You never hear
Right.
that, right? So,
Apply that same logic to the services too.
exactly. I want the same level of service, so when something like this does go out, rightfully so, blow it up.
Yeah. And looking at, it appeared to be like, of course, an inconvenience, especially when you have movies and those type of things. But I think the biggest thing that kind of stands out to me is Apple Card. So Apple Card didn't fully go out. It's listed as being one of the partial outages and slowdowns. But anytime, you are impacting someone being able to purchase anything, or just their economic standard of living, that is always one of those things that gets people's kind of tongues kind of wagging, and like, what's going on? I can't use this, I can't use that. So, but it looks like, even though it was 2 days back to back of different services, it looks like everything is back up and running. But I thought it was interesting to note, because I too did not notice that anything went out. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. I had no idea that anything kind of changed. So on those things where if it affects you, it just blows up your whole world. And if it doesn't affect you, you're like, oh, okay, sure. Didn't
Mhm.
know that happened.